In this lecture module, we're going to be looking at the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, operations. This describes how monetary policy is attempted to be created by the Federal Reserve System. So the way the reserve banking system works is a saver. Remember, wealth is created through capital accumulation, profits, and savings, and that creates time preferences and then facilitates transactions in the loanable funds market. So a saver will put in $10 at the commercial bank one, and then let's say, for example, that the commercial bank needs to put 10% of all of its savings on reserve in order for these savings to be guaranteed under the this political banking system known as the Federal Reserve System. So the commercial banks hold federal government debt as reserves. So saver one puts $10 in, and bank one puts $1 of reserves at the central bank in the form of federal government debt, right? So the banking system is created so that there's a market for people to buy government debt. And then then commercial bank one then lends $9 to borrower one. Borrower one then puts this money in the bank, and then they put it on this bank and puts those savings into the on reserve, and that continues, and that's reserve banking. And so ideally what would happen is the borrower would use this money for value creating entrepreneurial investments. However, you have regime uncertainty. Not always will the investment environment be such that there might be constant change in the rule of law, so people are uncertain about their future investments. So that's called pushing on a string, is when you can have expansionary monetary policy, yet it's not creating entrepreneurial activity because of regime uncertainty. That's called pushing on a string. And we have a hard-fire TV show, The Problem with Macroeconomics, if you're interested in regime uncertainty and pushing on a string, and the fallacy that central banking can actually create economic activity. So let's say that we're on occasion, like right now, during the coronavirus, where the economy is on a lockdown. So now the central bank says that it's going to do unlimited monetary policy to fight the crisis, unlimited. So let's just show as an example how expansionary monetary policy works. What happens, the central bank, FOMC, decides they need to do monetary stimulus. So what they do is they print money, you give it to the commercial bank, and then the commercial bank sells back the bonds. So the central bank buys bonds from the banks in return for money, and this is supposed to create liquidity in the market. So when the central bank wants to do expansionary monetary policy, it prints money and buys bonds from the banks, and that's then supposed to create more onward activity as the banks now have more money to lend. But like I said, that's can be pushing on a string if the rule of law is not sound enough for investment. So that's why then this type of interventionist thinking, then monetary policy doesn't work. Then you have to use fiscal policy. And then fiscal policy leads to the political pandering and all the big debt that's been created. Then when the Fed needs to stop its easy money expansionary activities to prevent inflation interventions, it does the opposite. It then sells bonds to the commercial bank. In return, the commercial banks give money to the Fed. And then that is a contractionary monetary policy. And that's what pops the bubble that the expansionary monetary policy creates. So there's this Murray Rothbard, who's a big critic of central banking, but he wants to go, he's good at his critique, but he's bad at the prescription, because Rothbard wants to go to 100% gold standard. But that's not going to work, because the gold standard emerged. It wasn't planned. It was emerged leading up to the classical liberal period of history. So classical liberals like myself say no, or like Hayek, no, don't require or mandate 100% reserves, just allow competition against this Federal Reserve system, and then see what emerges, and alternative forms of currency to prevent the boom and bust banking and inefficient and regressive monetary policy the way it is. So anyway, that's our introduction to the FOMC monetary policy. Thank you.